We talk a lot about how to get rid of pests that are bothering our orchids, things like mealybugs, thrips, scale, spider mites. All of these things can be really bad for our orchids. But did you know that there are some insects and small animals that can actually be really good for your orchids? So let's talk about what these are, because there are actually so many. So one of them is the one that you probably already know about, and that is a ladybug. If you ever see a ladybug by your orchid, just leave it there. Ladybugs love to eat aphids. Another one is a toad. So if you grow orchids indoors, you may not want a toad hanging around, but if you grow outdoors or have a greenhouse, toads can be really good. They eat caterpillars, beetles, slugs, which can be just wreak havoc on your orchids. They also eat spiders, snails, and woodlice, which I think woodlice, the little roly-polies, I think they're kind of gross. Another one that you may not want hanging around indoors are frogs. Frogs eat flies, they eat moths, they eat crickets, which can be really bad for orchids, and grasshoppers. Another one that you may not really enjoy but also eat a lot of insects are spiders. I happen to think that praying mantises are really cool, and they have a voracious appetite, and they like to eat things like moths, crickets, grasshoppers, and flies. And if you live in a location where you get chameleons or newts, they are also very hungry and they will eat lots of pests. And they are constantly eating insects. So that is another one that you'd like to keep around. Daddy longlegs. I think they are very creepy, but they are very hungry and they will eat things like mites, aphids, fungus, mosquitoes, moths, flies, spiders, and even spider eggs. So they might look really creepy with their long, skinny legs, but they can be really good for eating pests that can really bother your orchids. Another thing that can be helpful are pollinators such as bees and wasps can also be really good to have around orchids. Springtails are another one that you may have noticed if you grow orchids hydroponically, because they like to hang out in water. They are looking for decomposing organic plant matter like molds and mildews. So they are not harmful at all. Make you feel a little bit worried the first time you see them before you know that they actually don't cause any problems and that they can be part of a really healthy ecosystem that's going on with your orchid care. Another thing that you might notice are tiny wood-eating nematodes, and they may already be in your bark before you even buy your orchids. They're just very common, and a lot of times they are not a cause for concern. If you start to notice something that's eating your orchid roots, then you would need to do something about it. But most of the time, these little tiny nematodes that show up in fir bark are not anything to worry about. Parasitic nematodes can eat things like aphids, scale, and mealybugs, so they can be really helpful. Also, keep an eye out for beneficial fungi and bacteria. They can also be helpful. Another thing, if you don't want to use pesticides, you can buy predatory mites. Predatory mites will eat mites and spider mites, and aphid midges will eat aphids. These are all little creatures that can be friendly towards our orchids. So not all bugs, not all bacteria, not all fungus are bad, right? So a lot of these things can be helpful to help maintain a really healthy environment for our orchids. Some of these things we might want to be careful with if we are growing our orchids indoors, but a lot of them can be really helpful to maintaining a really healthy orchid growing environment. If you thought that this video was interesting and helpful, then I invite you to join our Orchid Buds community, which is a really fun and helpful place to grow orchids. Our community, Orchid Buds, was ranked by Circle. The software that I use to host the community has named Orchid Buds one of their very top communities. It's a great place to gain some orchid friends and get support and helpful educational materials to grow healthier orchids.